Hello, friends. Welcome to Jerry on Ice, your weekly segment every Wednesday talking all things older adults. My name is Dustin Jones. I teach modern management of the older adult with Christina Previtt. Today is a special episode because I received an awesome article from a buddy, a physio colleague, Neil, the Kettlebell physio, as you all may know him, sent me this article because he's getting his PhD looking at kettlebell training and its effects on older adults. He sent this over, so I figured today would be a good opportunity to share this article with you all. So this year, there's a group out of Taiwan, Chen et al., that wrote effects of 8-week kettlebell training on body composition, muscle strength, pulmonary function, and chronic low-grade inflammation in elderly women with sarcopenia. So they recruited 33 women between the ages of 65 and 75 with sarcopenia. Their exclusion criteria basically ensured that their sample size was pretty healthy, which, could be applicable to a lot of our patients. Not all of them, but a good bit of them. Now, they took these participants and split them up into two groups. So you had the kettlebell group and the control group. The program was 8 weeks long. The kettlebell group trained 2 times a week for 60 minutes each time. And they exercised, they did their programming at 60 to 70% of their 1 rep max. And what they did, they picked 5 movements and just performed 3 sets of around 8 to 12 reps with some rests in between the different types of exercise. And we'll go through those exercises in a minute. And then the control group, all they did was just maintain their current activity levels and their diet and tried not to change a thing. And then both groups had a 4-week period of detraining, which basically, meant to just continue on with life like you were before this study, trying to keep those activity levels in your diet, and just to see kind of the effects after that the training sessions stopped. Here are the movements they performed: the kettlebell swing, the kettlebell deadlift, kettlebell goblet squat, the squat lunge, the two-handed military press, biceps or curls for the girls, tricep extensions, and then the lovely Turkish get up. And I do need to mention that these are my assumptions. They did not give specific details to the exercises, but those are my interpretations of the words that they used. And the most surprising thing for me is that they loaded a Turkish get up 60 to 70% 1 RM in 8 weeks with this patient population. I'd like to know how they did that. That's pretty impressive. So they looked at body composition, in particular the appendicular skeletal muscle mass, the body fat mass, visceral fat area, and then the sarcopenia index. Then they looked at grip strength and back strength using these devices, and then pulmonary function, their peak expiratory flow, and their forced vital capacity. And then they took their blood and then measured some inflammatory indicators. And what they did, they took these measurements before the training, after the 8 weeks, and then after that 4-week detraining period, or at 12 weeks, basically, is how we can think about it. So what was their conclusion? For elderly people, we'll call them older adults, with sarcopenia, participating in kettlebell training significantly increases the sarcopenia index, the grip strength, the back strength, and peak expiratory flow. In addition, the retention effect of the training program continued after 4 weeks of detraining. And I know what y'all are thinking. Why are we still talking about resistance training and its impact on older adults? I know you're probably getting sick of it by now, but I'm not going to shut up until we actually see people changing their behaviors in the clinic, in the home, in the facilities, to where we're actually better serving older adults. But I want to tell you why this gets me really excited. Number one, why I'm excited about this article is that it is another article that I can put in the old not weak category to demonstrate that older adults benefit from doing hard things. Much like the Lift More trial, for example. When older adults have a properly dosed exercise regimen, they do really well. There may be exceptions to that rule, but the vast majority of people that we see are going to benefit from this stuff. But in particular, in the world of geriatric physical therapy literature, when you look at the resistance training research, the overwhelming majority of that research, the intervention is some type of seated TheraBand exercise routine. Very rarely you're going to see standing exercises, and then B, standing exercises that are actually loaded with some type of resistance. And if you do see that, man, you better save that article because there's not very many of them. And, there's several, I understand the constraints and how complicated it can be to perform some of these studies, but that evidence is growing where we're seeing research with older adults where they are performing kettlebell swings and deadlifts and squats, which is really exciting because that's really going to shape this current evidence that we are really gleaning from to apply to our patients. Because to be quite frank with you, a lot of the things that Christina and I talk about are largely based on proven principles, like the said principle, specific adaptations to imposed demands. Yes, there is some evidence to show that, deadlifts and barbell squats and loaded carries are good for older adults, but there's not a ton of it. So it's something that we can't, stand on solid ground and shout from the mountaintops per se. We need to have some type of humility, but we largely have been basing a lot on theory. But the evidence is continually mounting and growing to where we can say and cite specific articles that are showing that kettlebell swings are good for older adults. So a lot of this stuff is new, it's novel, and the research is starting to really gain steam in that world, which makes me really excited. And, we get to interact with a lot of the researchers that are performing some of these trials, Christina being one of them. So it's cool to see what's coming down the pike in terms of some of these different trials. The second thing that makes me very, very excited about this is that it actually used kettlebells. Now, we talk a lot about barbells on, PT on Ice, especially on Fridays, Fitness Athlete Fridays. Barbells are awesome. I'm really hoping that a lot of you outpatient clinicians are considering getting a barbell and a rack in your clinic. That would be really cool, that you can load your patients in that manner and very effective. But we should not forget the practicality, the affordability, and the efficiency that a kettlebell can bring to the table. There is very low barrier to entry to get a kettlebell and to use it in your clinic. It doesn't take a lot of space. It's relatively cheap. It's not very intimidating for your patients because it's so dense and small, and you can do a lot with it in a very short period of time. That's why I love having them. In my little Honda Fit, I can fit a whole bunch of kettlebells in the back because they are very practical. So I don't want you all to really miss out on the power of using kettlebells in your practice. So lastly, we need to talk about what does this mean? Why would we get excited about this article if we don't actually know how it's going to inform our practice? There's a few things that I want you all to consider, to reflect on and think about. This article really shows that intensity is very, very important for our patients. A lot of the resistance training literature is going to echo that as well. Intensity is huge. Their programming was at 60 to 70% of a 1-rep max. It wasn't at 20% of a 1-rep max, but 60 to 70% of a 1RM. They probably wouldn't have seen the same results if the intensity was lower. So our intensity does need to be dialed in, and you can do it by testing a 1RM or something like rating of perceived exertion can be helpful as well. We've talked about the modified Borg or the OmniRes scale in this podcast several times. The second thing that I think we need to take away with is that these were some very challenging exercises that they used. I mean, they used a Turkish get-up, for example. They loaded a Turkish get-up 60 to 70% of the 1-rep max in 8 weeks. I want to know how they did that, but that is impressive and very challenging. And what I want you all to think about is if you want to use some of these exercises in your programming, I highly encourage you to try them out yourself. You need to understand how to perform the movements, how to coach the movements, some common difficulties with these movements, because there's a lot of patterns and themes, especially in the older adult population, of where they kind of trip up when they're performing a Turkish get-up or a kettlebell swing or a goblet squat, for example. So do these. You're going to benefit tremendously. I know I can speak for myself with my terrible ankle dorsiflexion on both sides, that the fact that I absolutely hate squatting and I struggle with it tremendously, but I know how to compensate for it, that has helped me tremendously with a lot of my patients, because the majority of my patients have very limited ankle dorsiflexion. So try some of these exercises. Don't load them too much. Don't want you to potentially hurt yourself. But just start easy and then gradually progress from there, and get some feedback from a colleague. Be careful with those YouTube videos though. You can get into a sticky situation. And last but not least, you may look at some of these exercises like a Turkish get up, like a kettlebell swing, a kettlebell deadlift, goblet squat, squat lunge, all these different things that they did, and think, how in the world am I going to do this with my patients? They're not capable of doing it, so I should just kind of put this article off to the side and just forget about it. Please don't do that. Understand that there are modifications that you can do to make a modified Turkish get up, a possibility for your patient, or a modified goblet squat, or a modified deadlift, so you can load people, get that intensity up that we know is good for our patients, and perform some of these exercises. There's lots of modifications that we can do to make this program a reality for many of our patients. And so when I went through this study, I realized that could be something that could potentially trip you up. So I made a video that goes through some of the most essential common modifications that you can make if you want to use some of these exercises with your older adult patients. In specific, the Turkish get up, the goblet squat, the deadlift, and then loaded carries. Loaded carries, they were not in this program, but I'm a huge fan of those. But those 4 activities, what are the most common modifications and helpful modifications that you can do today to implement kettlebells with older adults? So for that video, there's going to be a link in this post in the comments as well, to where just click on that, and that's going to take you to where you can watch that video. It's about 6 minutes long. I tried to make it pretty compact and just dense with helpful information, but it's a great start for you to be very, very comfortable with starting to implement some of this in your clinic, in home health, or in your facility. So check out that link. I highly encourage you to do so. I appreciate you all watching or listening to this. Thank you for your time. Enjoy yourself in the clinic. Serve your patients well, and I'll talk to you all in a couple weeks. Hello, friends. Welcome to Jerry on Ice, your weekly segment every Wednesday talking all things older adults. My name is Dustin Jones. I teach modern management of the older adult with Christina Previtt. Today is a special episode because I received an awesome article from a buddy, a physio colleague, Neil, the Kettlebell physio, as you all may know him, sent me this article because he's getting his PhD looking at kettlebell training and its effects on older adults. He sent this over, so I figured today would be a good opportunity to share this article with you all. So this year, there's a group out of Taiwan, Chen et al., that wrote effects of 8-week kettlebell training on body composition, muscle strength, pulmonary function, and chronic low-grade inflammation in elderly women with sarcopenia. So they recruited 33 women between the ages of 65 and 75 with sarcopenia. Their exclusion criteria basically ensured that their sample size was pretty healthy, which, could be applicable to a lot of our patients. Not all of them, but a good bit of them. Now, they took these participants and split them up into 2 groups. So you had the kettlebell group and the control group. The program was 8 weeks long. The kettlebell group trained 2 times a week for 60 minutes each time. And they exercised, they did their programming at 60 to 70% of their 1 rep max. And what they did, they picked 5 movements and just performed 3 sets of around 8 to 12 reps with some rests in between the different types of exercise. And we'll go through those exercises in a minute. And then the control group, all they did was just maintain their current activity levels and their diet and tried not to change a thing. And then both groups had a 4-week period of detraining, which basically, meant to just continue on with life like you were before this study, trying to keep those activity levels in your diet, and just to see kind of the effects after that the training sessions stopped. Here are the movements they performed: the kettlebell swing, the kettlebell deadlift, kettlebell goblet squat, the squat lunge,